The cafe fell silent as the muscular man towered over Michael and his 6-year-old daughter. "What kind of man can't even control his own kid?" the bully sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. What happened next would leave everyone in that cafe speechless, and remind them why you should never judge someone based on appearances alone. If you've ever witnessed someone standing up against injustice in the most unexpected way, hit that like button right now and subscribe to see more stories of everyday heroes who prove that sometimes, the quietest people have the most to say. Michael Jenkins just wanted a peaceful Saturday morning with his daughter Emma. Since losing his wife to cancer 3 years ago, these weekend cafe visits had become their special ritual, a small slice of normalcy in a life that had been anything but normal. At 42, Michael's gentle demeanor and slightly disheveled appearance gave little indication of the 15 years he'd spent as an elite Delta Force operator before retiring to raise his daughter. The trouble started when Emma accidentally bumped into a man while returning from the bathroom. The coffee barely splashed, but the man, a gym-toned 30-something with a designer watch and an inflated sense of self-importance, acted as if she'd committed a capital offense. "Watch where you're going, kid," he snapped, loud enough to turn heads. Emma, already shy around strangers, froze in place. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible as her eyes welled with tears. Michael was already halfway out of his seat when the man continued, "Maybe if your dad taught you some manners instead of letting you run wild." "She apologized," Michael said quietly, placing a protective hand on Emma's shoulder. "It was an accident." The bully, whose name they would later learn was Trevor, looked Michael up and down with contempt. Michael's faded jeans and simple button-up shirt were a stark contrast to Trevor's expensive athleisure wear. To someone like Trevor, appearances were everything, and he'd already decided Michael wasn't worth respecting. "Yeah, well, maybe you should focus more on parenting and less on whatever sad excuse for a life you've got going on," Trevor said with a smirk, glancing at his 2 friends who chuckled on cue. "Single dad, right? Let me guess, she left because you couldn't man up?" The cafe had gone completely silent now. Emma's small hand clutched her father's, tears streaming down her face. Something flickered in Michael's eyes, not anger, but a calm, focused intensity that would have terrified anyone who recognized it for what it was. "Emma, sweetheart," Michael said gently, "go sit at our table for a minute." "But Daddy." "It's okay, princess. Just 1 minute." As Emma reluctantly returned to their table, Trevor leaned in closer to Michael. "What are you gonna do, tough guy? Cry about it?" What happened next occurred so quickly that most patrons would later disagree about the exact sequence of events. In one fluid motion, Michael's hand shot out, gripping Trevor's wrist with such precision that the pressure points he targeted sent immediate signals of pain without leaving a mark. His other hand simultaneously applied the slightest pressure to Trevor's elbow joint, creating an invisible control mechanism that only Trevor could feel, a searing, immobilizing pain that didn't require violence or spectacle. "Here's what's going to happen," Michael said, his voice still conversational though only Trevor could hear him. "You're going to apologize to my daughter. Then you're going to sit down, finish your coffee, and leave. And if I ever see you speak to a child like that again, we'll have a much different conversation. Understood?" The color had drained from Trevor's face. The pressure points Michael was manipulating sent waves of pain through his arm, but to everyone watching, it merely looked like Michael had placed a friendly hand on the man's arm. "Dude, you're hurting me," Trevor whispered, panic replacing his arrogance. "I haven't even started," Michael replied calmly. "The apology?" Trevor's friend stood up, sensing something was wrong, but Michael's gaze, now unmistakably that of a predator, froze them in place. I'm sorry," Trevor called out to Emma, his voice strained. "I shouldn't have spoken to you that way." Michael released his grip and stepped back. Trevor stumbled slightly, rubbing his wrist while trying to maintain what little dignity he had left. His friends, reading the room, quickly gathered their things. "Let's go," Trevor muttered to them, avoiding eye contact with everyone as they hurried out. The cafe remained silent for a moment before conversations gradually resumed. Michael returned to Emma, who looked up at him with wide eyes. "Are you okay, Daddy?" Michael smiled, the intensity gone from his eyes, replaced by the gentle warmth reserved only for his daughter. "I'm perfect, sweetheart. How about we get some hot chocolate to go with those pancakes?" An elderly man at the next table leaned over. "Former military?" he asked quietly. Michael nodded slightly. "Something like that. Thought so. My son was Special Forces. You all have that same look when the switch flips." The man smiled. "Your little girl's lucky to have you." Michael thanked him and turned his attention back to Emma, who was already describing in detail exactly how much whipped cream her hot chocolate should have. What no one in the cafe knew was that Michael's journey to this moment had been far more complex than a simple transition from soldier to civilian. After his wife Sarah's diagnosis, he'd requested a transfer to a training position. When the cancer progressed faster than expected, he'd resigned his commission entirely, determined to give his wife whatever time she had left without the constant separations his job demanded. The months after Sarah's death had been the darkest of Michael's life. The man who had navigated hostile territories across the globe found himself utterly lost in the simple act of raising a 4-year-old girl alone. There were nights he sat on the bathroom floor, door closed so Emma wouldn't hear him cry, wondering how he could possibly be what she needed. It was Emma herself who had saved him, with her resilience and her uncanny ability to find joy in small things, like Saturday morning pancakes at their local cafe. Michael had learned to rebuild his life around her needs, channeling the same discipline and focus that had made him an elite operator into becoming the father she deserved. The cafe owner, Maria, approached their table with 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate, each topped with a mountain of whipped cream. "On the house," she said with a warm smile. "That man has been bothering customers for weeks. About time someone stood up to him." "I didn't do anything," Michael said. Maria raised an eyebrow. "Sometimes nothing looks like something to those who know what to look for." She winked at Emma. "Extra chocolate syrup for the brave young lady." As they enjoyed their pancakes and hot chocolate, Michael noticed a young woman approaching their table hesitantly. She looked to be in her early 30s, with a kind face and tired eyes. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, "but I wanted to thank you. That man and his friends have been coming here for months, making everyone uncomfortable. No one's ever stood up to them." Michael nodded politely. "Just a misunderstanding. I'm Alicia," she continued, then gestured to a table where a boy about Emma's age sat watching them. "That's my son, Jake. He's been begging me to thank the ninja dad since you made those guys leave." Emma perked up at the mention of another child. "Can he come sit with us? I can share my whipped cream." The adults exchanged amused glances, and soon Jake had joined them, he and Emma immediately launching into an animated conversation about their favorite cartoon characters. "Single mom?" Michael asked quietly. Alicia nodded. 3 years now. Car accident. You? Cancer. 3 years ago too. A moment of understanding passed between them, the kind that only those who have walked similar paths can truly share. "Jake and I come here every Saturday too," Alicia said. "Usually around this time." Michael smiled. "What a coincidence. So do we." As the children chattered away, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, the quiet possibility of connection. Not to replace what he'd lost, but to build something new alongside the life he'd created with Emma. The following Saturday, they arrived at the cafe to find Alicia and Jake already there, saving them seats. The Saturday after that, they decided to visit the zoo together after breakfast. By the 3rd month, their Saturday outings had become a cherished routine for both families. Trevor and his friends never returned to the cafe. Rumors circulated that he'd told people about a psycho ex-military guy who had nearly broken his arm, but since no one who witnessed the incident saw anything more than a quiet conversation, the stories were dismissed as exaggeration. 6 months after the confrontation, Michael sat in the same cafe, watching Emma and Jake coloring together while he and Alicia talked about an upcoming school event. Maria brought their usual order without being asked, giving Michael a knowing smile. "You know," Alicia said, "Jake asked me yesterday if you were going to be his new dad someday." Michael nearly choked on his coffee. "What did you tell him?" "That grown-up relationships are complicated," she replied with a small smile. "But that sometimes, the best things happen when we least expect them." Michael looked at Emma, happily sharing her crayons with Jake, and felt a surge of gratitude for the life they'd rebuilt from the ashes of loss. His years as a Delta operator had taught him how to face danger without flinching, but it was his daughter who had taught him the true meaning of courage, the courage to keep living, to stay open to joy even after devastating loss. "I think," he said slowly, reaching across the table to take Alicia's hand, "that your son might be onto something." The cafe that had once witnessed his quiet display of power now witnessed something equally powerful but infinitely more rare, a family finding its way back to wholeness, proving that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism happen not on battlefields, but in the everyday courage to keep your heart open after it's been broken. As for Trevor, he never knew that the sad excuse for a life he had mocked was that of a man who had served with distinction in some of the world's most dangerous places. He never knew that the single dad he had ridiculed had held his wife's hand as she took her last breath, promising to give their daughter enough love for both of them. And he never knew that his moment of cruelty had inadvertently set in motion a chain of events that would bring healing to 2 broken families. Sometimes, the most important battles we fight aren't against enemies, but against our own fear of beginning again. And sometimes, the most powerful force isn't the ability to subdue others, but the courage to remain gentle in a world that mistakes kindness for weakness. If this story touched your heart, remember to like and subscribe for more content that reminds us of the extraordinary courage found in ordinary lives. Because in the end, the greatest legends aren't those who display their power for all to see, they're the quiet heroes who use their strength to protect, to nurture, and to love.